Okay, hi Year 11. So, bit of feedback for Lesson 4 then. So, Lesson 4 was about attempts at improving public health. So, in other words, making the population healthier. A few questions or tasks to do here. Number one, why do you think that Cardiff Council ignored the work of Dr. Payne? Right. So, you read about Dr. Payne here, he did a report, and he found that, cholera was focused in one part of the town where there was lots of poorer people. And they ignored that work, and the reason why they ignored it is to do with this phrase, okay, laissez-faire, which you've come across, if you remember, in previous booklets. And it's all about the fact that at the time, unlike today, where the government takes quite a big role in our lives, so today the government is in charge of education and health and transport policy, security, all those sorts of things. Well, back then, the government really only concerned itself with foreign affairs, like, going to war. Or how high taxes should be, okay? And everything else, pretty much everything else, they left up to other people, okay? So that's why kids didn't go to school. And that's why people didn't have healthcare, really, okay? Because, as it says here, the government thought that people were responsible themselves. And they just took a step back. All right, so if you didn't have that word in your answer for Lesson 4, go back and add that in. This table then, so the health board was responsible for sewers and drains, and you had to fill out why it was a problem or what it led to. Okay, so I've got here some of my ideas. Well, before there were sewers, obviously people just chucked all their waste into the streets. It would end up going into the water supply. People's homes here, so some people lived in basements, remember. And I say some people, families, 2 or 3 families at a time sharing the same basement often. And when it rained, obviously everything from the street just kind of washed into these people's basements. You can imagine the amount of ill health and death that caused, in particular cholera and typhoid. Pretty much the same as above then for wells and supplies of water. People would go to the well at the end of the street because they didn't have taps in their homes and pumped water. So they'd have to pump it themselves at the end of the street, and that well was probably contaminated with all the excrement, which was just basically left in the streets or chucked into the river. Refuse itself, so that's all, things like rubbish just left uncollected. There were no bin men back then. It obviously attracted rats, and you can imagine the amounts of disease that they could spread, and flies and stuff like that. Water supply contaminated as a result. All this rubbish would get into the water supply as well. Housing unfit for human habitation, so lots of overcrowding, therefore disease could spread quicker. Houses often collapsed because they weren't built very well at all. No amenities, so no running water, no electricity, no insulation, windows smashed, things like that, not replaced. Pretty horrible places to live. Now, public baths, that was a slightly different one. You didn't have to say what the problem was there. You just need to say why they were needed. Well, people didn't have the ability to wash themselves at home. 5, here we go for the last task, 5 achievements of Dr. Payne. You pause the video here. Anything that's highlighted, get that into your table. And then for Lesson 5, attempts at improving public health part 2. Watch the following clip. Tell me something about Edwin Chadwick and John Snow and how they helped improve public health. Task 2, question 1. So you've got a question here. The Public Health Act gave permission for local authorities to improve sewers, the water supply and cleaning. So why was the Sanitary Act passed in 1866? A little bit of a trick question here, okay? So the Sanitary Act and the Public Health Act basically did the same thing, but there was a slight difference in emphasis on a certain word, okay? See if you can pick up on what that word is. I'll also go through that with you next lesson. What is meant by the term deserving poor? How often so that's just a guesstimate, how often do you think people washed? Task 3, read through this information, maybe the information from Lesson 4 as well for one of these, and just tell me what each of these acts did to make people's lives better. Okay, so best of luck with that, Year 11, and I'll give you feedback next lesson. Cheers.